Hey, Heather.
Hi,
How are
can you
you?
hear me? I'm fantastic. Thank you. How are
I
you?
can hear. I'm good. I can
Okay.
hear you
Oh,
well. Let me know if you can't hear me. I've been dealing with connectivity issues more or less this whole week because there's been a pole down. So
oh my
sometimes
God.
I don't know. I don't know if you can hear me or not. So just mention something. All right.
Okay, you got it.
Well, thanks for hopping on here.
Yeah,
How's your day going so far?
it's been so beautiful. It's the morning here, so I've been doing coffee and meditation. It's gorgeous. How about yourself?
That's how I like to start my days too.
Yeah,
But Heather's on
absolutely.
Pacific time, so
Yeah,
it's 10 a.m. there. Yeah.
yeah.
And you're in where was it?
Huntington Beach.
Huntington. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Right by the ocean.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, well, look, let's jump into things if that's cool with you.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
for those who are tuning in and will be tuning in, I stumbled across Heather. Just I think it was randomly when I was looking through various ASIM Course in Miracle pages, and Heather's energy immediately caught my attention. I would probably say that the purity in which Heather spoke about truth really attracted me and made me interested to talk with her more, get to know her better. Heather's an Awakenpedian as well. She's a member of
Yep,
the
yep.
group.
Love it.
And to do this live together, because I think you're someone that has a lot to share in terms of spirit and connectedness to spirit, and being able to help others heal by sharing that wisdom,
Yeah.
because you speak from a place of truth. So today we're talking about the power of spirit and trauma recovery, among other things, because none of this is scripted. For
Right.
everyone who's listening, this is always in the now conversation that is originating from the unknown, and we're seeing where things go.
Yeah.
But with some direction, and that is talking about spirit and its role in helping us to recover from trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think would be cool, Heather, is maybe we start by actually trying to describe or define what spirit is, trauma, and recovery from trauma, what those things mean. And I'll take this like the first stab at it, and you can fill in everywhere I miss. But after providing that type of overview, use that framework to describe our personal awakening stories and how we were able to kind of overcome or transcend trauma ourselves, and to come into this deeper groundedness and stability that we find through spirit. So does that sound good to you too?
Perfect. Awesome.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So let's start with trauma. Like, when I think of trauma and what that really is, to me, I kind of call it like an ego imprint, or like an ego branding. And what I mean by that is that it's really just, the summation of our conditionings that represents our trapped energy that we carry through us in our form as we experience life, that ultimately colors the way in which we interpret reality. So these are energy blocks, that, pain bodies that we carry with us, that affect the way we see the world and see ourselves. And that's why, they say you see the world the way you are, not the way it is. And as long as you're carrying some type of trauma, that's true, because you're seeing through your traumas, through your conditionings. So that's how I describe trauma, which is, trauma can be as severe or can be not severe. It's really just any type of conditioning that you're exposed to, that's imposed upon you, that you have yet to release and heal from. And that's what, kind of stems into recovery, in terms of how I would view recovering from trauma. What does that really mean? In the most simple view, I would say recovery is the release of that trapped energy, and letting it go so that it doesn't weigh you down and you're free from the trauma. You're free from that trapped energy. And then the question is, well, what's spirit? And then what's spirit's role in helping you to recover from trauma? And spirit, as I see it, is most simply and purely the pure consciousness that is used to shine its light on the darkness of the trauma to facilitate the process of letting it go. So when we connect with that spirit and the consciousness, we're able to shine it on the darkness that is the ego, which facilitates the healing process that is the liberation of that energy, that trapped energy. So that's kind of the way in which I view spirit, trauma, recovery, and the interconnectedness of those three dynamics. Is there anything you want to add to that, or you feel like?
Sure.
Let's hear your take too.
Yeah, and you have a very comprehensive view of all of it. It's beautiful. To add to the definition of trauma, I just through my own journey, I've thought of trauma, or come to think of it, as a mistaken perception. So you talked about these conditionings, definitions, identities that are imposed upon us. I think we inherit some of them, and I think a lot are imposed on us by other people's pain projections. Their unresolved pain is thrown onto us, and as children, we adopt them as our story, as our reality. And at the end of the day, that adopting of somebody else's story and identity is a mistaken perception. So as long as we hold on to that mistaken perception of I'm broken, I'm worthless, I'm weak, I'm powerless, as long as we hold on to that through whatever we've experienced, it becomes trauma. And then we wrap it in stories, and it gains density in our mind, in our heart, and then in our body. So trauma to me is a mistaken perception that we wrap in a story and we hold on to, and then we embody, and it becomes hardened more and more until we learn how to release it. And recovery for me is just the correction of the mistaken perception, is a willingness to release stories and a willingness to see ourselves differently, to come home to, one, it's not personal. And that can be very difficult, especially when we've been, in abusive childhood situations for years and years and years, for somebody to come around and say it's not personal. Like, what do you mean? But it's not. It's not. So one, it's not personal. And two, we have responsibility. We have the ability to choose how we respond to life. Are we responding from a place of weakness and powerlessness? Or are we responding from a place of power, of hope, of freedom, of love and steadiness? And when we stay in that power and stop taking any of it personally, as you said, we see the world as we are. So what is it but a mirror, but a co-creative garden? When we start to see it that way, we recover from trauma. It's no longer trauma. It's a portal for transformation. It's a portal for coming home.
Yeah.
And spirit, I totally agree, is that eternal field of consciousness that holds truth, which is unbroken, unchanging, undying, eternal, infinite, in every cell of our body, in every neuron in your brain, in your aura, in your energetic body, in everything. It's truth. It's the truth that we're all interconnected, that nothing can be added to you or taken from you. You cannot be broken. It's the truth that underlies all the illusions that we play around with. And when we allow that light to shine on those places that we kind of feel ashamed about or are hiding, when we shine it under all the rocks, we start to see it disappears. It holds no actual weight, these illusions of trauma that we have. And that the only thing strong enough to shine through that darkness is the light of consciousness, is spirit.
Yeah.
That would be, yeah.
For everyone listening now, you see why I wanted to talk with Heather and bring her here, because I love listening to you.
Thank you.
We speak the same language and even use the same nomenclature. And because of A Course in Miracles in our background and, you know, our resonance with that text, which is so brilliant.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know, we see things very similarly, as all people of truth do, but a lot of people have different roads of how they get there and how they see it, and, you know, the way they describe the describelessness of what truth is. So but yeah, loved everything you said. Spot on. I feel the same way. And you know, that word you use, I have a teaching on that too, density. And I talk about ego density, and that's the way I frame it, which is that the longer we do hold on to these stories and the more that we reinforce them with our mental, emotional, behavioral patterns, and how that, you know, that flow of energy in terms of reconditioning and engrooving that toxicity, the more hardened the ego becomes, the deeper that belief system is, you know, basically inscribed in the brain-body connection. And ultimately, that's, you know, from the mind-body perspective, that's releasing, you know, a neurochemical cocktail that is ultimately what's affecting your gene expression and what manifests ultimately as physical illness. When we hold that energy, that egoic energy within us, we know it's not healthy or natural because it's quite literally making us sick.
Yes.
And you know, of course, though, in the West, we confuse the symptom of sickness with the cause. And so, you know, we end up putting Band-Aids on an infection. And so the symptoms continue to resurface throughout life. But, you know, I think we're starting to, as we transition into the new earth and, you know, the collective energy shifts here, we're starting to see more of that ego density as, you know, the primary contributing factor to sickness here. And the aim is to, you know, lighten that ego density, to reduce your identification exclusively with the mind, so that you can start seeing the world the way it is, as opposed to the way you think it is. And that takes the suffering away, right? The suffering entity itself. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so hopefully for those who are listening to this so far, like, you know, just having a little context of like how spiritualists or energy workers kind of view trauma, recovery, spirit, and the interconnectedness of those in the context of the healing process, you know, that can set the stage, I think, really well as we talk about our personal journeys. And I think that's what I'd love to go into now, Heather, is in our personal stories, our personal narratives, for what it's worth, sharing, you know, what traumas we've endured and how we've used the power of spirit in the process of recovery, and which, as we just pointed to, is letting go and, you know, liberating ourselves from those energy blocks within us. So would you like to go first and just share whatever you're comfortable sharing in terms of, you know, your story and how you've come into this insight and wisdom that you so beautifully share to the world through your page? And anything that you'd like to talk about in terms of your story and how that can serve others?
Yes, absolutely. And that statement, how it can serve others, I think there's power in sharing not only the story, but the triumph through the story, so that others know, one, they're not alone, and two, there's hope and there's resolution possible. Thank you. So I grew up, I came into this world into a very dysfunctional home. There was a lot of abuse and there was a lot of neglect. And so basically all I knew, like as a child, was pain. Like I knew that I was worthless. I was taught and I inherited the beliefs that I didn't belong here. I should be ashamed of my existence. I mean, this was a daily thing. Like, talk about conditioning, right? So I came into, 14 years of age, and I tried to commit suicide, almost succeeded, and was taken to the ER. And then they put me in a psych ward for teenagers. And that was such a beautiful change in my life, because up until that point, I had been alone. Like, I had no siblings. I was silent about what I experienced at home. That a lot of kids experience that. They keep it silent. They don't talk about it. And when I was in this place, I saw so many along the entire spectrum of human suffering. And I saw, one, I'm not alone in this. So many people are suffering.
Yeah.
And two, the systems that were in place that were supposedly medical and healing were completely backwards. I mean, I witnessed a young girl have a panic attack, okay, and like a full-on body, like sobbing, crying, can't breathe, panic attack. And the nurses, instead of helping her, strapped her to a gurney, like strapped down her ankles and her wrists, held her down. Multiple people held her down, which is, of course, making her panic more, and injected her with a sedative until she, wasn't conscious anymore. And I mean, the things that went on in that place were just one flew over the cuckoo's nest. And what it helped me see is that I'm not alone in my suffering, and something needs to be done. So at that age, I decided, whatever it takes, I'm going back out into the world, and I'm going to heal myself. And with a fire and a passion, I'm going to do whatever the heck I can to lift the consciousness and shift the infrastructure of how our society works, because this is ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah. So I came out of it, and I mean, it's been a journey. Like, I didn't come out of that healed. 15 years of programming takes a lot of effort and some time to rewire. But at that age, I started exploring Buddhism, meditation, Course in Miracles, and other modalities like yoga, neuroscience. And I mean, I used to carry index cards around with me that said, I'm worthy, I'm safe, I'm lovable. And I would literally read them all day long.
Retraining.
But I mean, retraining the mind, you have to reprogram it. And and putting your hand on your body and just saying, I'm safe, I'm home, just reprogramming. Because as Joe Dispenza says, neurons that fire together wire together. And it gets thicker and thicker, these beliefs. So it's really taking that train that's going 260 miles an hour in the direction of Traumaville and slowing it down, coming to a halt, and then going the other. Like, it's a process, and then I mean, I even got to I started going to college, and I was like a 4.0 student in calculus and neurobio. I had to drop out. I was having multiple panic attacks a day. I went through a phase. I was agoraphobic. I couldn't even take the trash out of my apartment. I was so scared to walk out the door. I mean, it's been, and that's my early 20s. So it's just been this. I was afraid of people. I couldn't let another human touch me. Like, I was scared of crowds. I just total depression, anxiety, loneliness. And so coming into works like A Course in Miracles and Buddhist teachings and yoga, just that alignment of the light of spirit with the mind as a tool, not your master, that's a big one. And then bringing that down into the body and working from body to mind and mind to body, because they are one related being. They are not separate entities. And so I actually did A Course in Miracles. They have the 365-day workbook. I did that for 2 years in a row, just day after day. And the way it deconstructs the illusions of the ego and the density of it, and realizing, looking back at the things I experienced from the adults in my life, I thought, okay, that's a projection of their pain. That's generational wounding coming through. I have the opportunity to stop that. I have the responsibility to heal that in my body and to heal that generational pattern. So I mean, in a nutshell, that's been a big part of my journey. Yeah.
And Heather, where would you say you feel in terms of like, and I know this is always hard, you can't really quantify or really measure these things in terms of like how much ego remains in you, right? But in terms of like your the things that the trauma that you continue to carry, in the sense that the conditionings you still are working through now, how do you feel now versus in the unawakened state, unconscious state? How much more peace do you have? And like, how do you deal with triggers now when you notice the conditioning being triggered?
That's such a powerful question. Thank you. Yes. So the first part of that, today, I feel like the human I always wanted to be, but I couldn't see how to get there. Like if I think back to that 17-year-old girl, like studying these books and listening to Tony Robbins and Joe Dispenza and like desperately going through this work, like this has got to have a solution. I wanted it, but I couldn't see the other side of the pain and the darkness. I was doing the work. I just didn't have any guarantee it was going to take me anywhere. This day, like I used to live in constant pain, constant. My body was in pain. I had digestive issues. I had headaches. I had fatigue. I mean, I was exhausted. These days, I feel a sense of steadiness. I feel at home in my body, like at home in my body. I look at myself, and I used to criticize my body and every little thing on it, and my hair and this. I'm like, thank you, body. Thank you that we're here. Like, thank you that we're alive and we get to cook and eat and smile and dance. And, I feel okay. Yeah. And even, of course, I have triggers these days still. But my ability to come back home is so strong. So yes, I still get triggered to this day. And honestly, like, there are certain things that will trigger a trauma response in me. Like my body will tremble and I won't be able to speak. It's a body response. And I'm still working with my nervous system to like, hey, we're safe, we're home. But even when I'm triggered these days, I'm able to use tools that I've learned along the way. So the 1 to 3 ratio of breathing, you breathe in for a certain counts and breathe out double or triple that. You exhale it, inhale, exhale, double to triple. Tapping EFT, lateral eye movements, and just self-talk, being able to witness panic, to witness a trauma response, to witness anxiety, and realize that's not my reality right now. That doesn't define me. I'm able to even a part of my mind is able to step out of it and say, okay, you're having a panic attack. You're having anxiety. You're feeling this emotion. Let's acknowledge it. Let's wrap it with a hug and some compassion, and do whatever needs to be done to bring you back home. Go take a cold shower, go sit down, go earth, do something, and let it pass through without resistance. Yeah.
Right. Being the witnessing presence so that you can create a bit of a distance between you, the real you, and the false you that is trying to convince you to make you think it's you. And so you can actually observe from the seat of consciousness, which is the empowered place to be, because you're actually being, and you're able to then respond intelligently as opposed to react impulsively. And so what you're talking about, like, Heather's the living truth here, guys, because she, it's a rarity today, because it's not to say that we have to, we're fully enlightened, where we have no conditionings, we have no blocks or egos, but we're on the journey of healing, and this is the path, this is the way in terms of how healing actually happens. And that's why this is so powerful, because we're providing examples and methodologies through which we can harness universal law and spirit to be able to alter our physical reality. It's the essence of manifestation and co-creation that allows us to actually be powerful and heal and essentially evolve our consciousness. So, I'm with you in the sense that I still continue to carry conditionings myself. I don't pretend to be some awakened Buddha that's going to magically change anyone's life. I just have gone through this experience, this profound spiritual transformation that's really opened my eyes to the truth and to what points to the truth. And there's no shame or guilt or judgment in having ego or conditionings, because it's the belief or the desire to not want them that keeps you stuck in them. And it's that famous line that, it's I think Alan Watts said it, but it is the ambition of the ego to be egoless. And I really I really resonate with that, which is why so much of this journey is just about a relaxing back into who you are, as opposed to some type of effort or fight or struggle to go seek it and be it. It's so simple, it's hard. It's so simple, it's complex. That's the paradox of truth. But even Ram Dass, one of the world's most renowned spiritual teachers while he was alive, still today, his messaging passes through to everyone who's on this journey. But he said, and he was saying this in his late 50s, but he was like, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a weekend with your parents. And, the point of that is to say, even the most advanced, spiritually advanced, consciously advanced people are still human, and we still are learning, which is the process of unlearning and healing and working through our karma and letting this trapped energy go so that we can return home. And the way you describe it is so beautiful, which is like, when you notice you're being triggered, you're noticing the flaring of your pain body, of the conditionings, you're able to, the essence of noticing your evolution of progress on this awakening journey is that the length of the refraction period from when you notice the emotion to when you can come back into stillness, into peace, who you really are. You described as home, right? And it's the home, who you are. And in the most enlightened, awakened state, in theory, that essentially is immediate, in the sense that there is no reaction, so that it passes through you essentially immediately as it happens, because you have no egoic energy blocks to make that energy stick as you experience life. And so I see that as that's the true nature of healing our traumas, which is healing our conditionings as we progress on this path. And it really then points to the fundamental pointer is that the healing journey is a consciousness journey. And as we ascend in consciousness and become more conscious human beings, the less trauma, the less blocks we carry within us, the less we identify with the mind. So we're able to just accept and be at peace with what is. And so I mean, just there's so much to unpack with all that stuff. But, thank you for sharing your journey and talking about your path here, and how you've grown. I think you're such a incredible example of the living truth, because we all have a story, but I think it's so important for people like us and for everyone to come forward to share their stories, so that to speak and to be vulnerable, so that we can actually heal and support each other through this healing, so that first step is getting out of denial.
Yeah.
So that you can, and that comes through courage, the willingness to really, lean into the darkness, and to just surrender to the unknown. So that even though you don't know where the other side leads, and you don't know if it will lead to anything, it requires that surrender, absolute unconditional surrender, which is the essence of trust.
Yeah.
And that's the essence of faith.
Yes.
So it's coming into faith, and that's, what it really means, the leap of faith, that famous idiom. So that's why I love talking about this. I live this too.
Of course,
It's become the purpose of my life here as well, is to help myself and help others heal. And I help myself heal by helping others heal too. I learn by teaching, and I think we all do.
What we give, we receive. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. So actually, I'm going to talk about my story just for a minute, because I remember Crystal here, who's commented a few times, talked about letting go of alcohol in a prior comment, in terms of how that's led to the clarity of transformation, the ability to transform here. And I mentioned that because addiction was my pathway to awakening. David R. Hawkins talks a lot about this, and it's interesting how we see so many more people coming into sobriety. I don't think it's a coincidence today, but it's because as we continue to become more conscious, addiction simply doesn't vibrate at the higher energy levels. And so, for me personally, I'm someone that, again, as we said, we all have the story. My story is one where I was, I had this dual foundation of being very successful egoically, meaning in the world's eyes, I was very successful, and, got to go to private school. I went to Yale, I played soccer, I went into private equity afterwards. And throughout all of that, I still was so unhappy and lost. And it was so confusing to me, because everyone was telling me I should have been the most happy person in the world, because I had what the world defined as happiness and success, the ingredients for it. So something didn't add up. So I had that underlying foundation of just confusion and disillusionment, even though I continued to be a very good brainwashed student and athlete and everything. But so, I was resonating with a lot of these spiritual authors actually at a young age, but I didn't know what it was. Like, I was reading Ralph Waldo Emerson and Alan Watts as a teenager, a young teenager, and something about them pulled me, but I couldn't articulate it, and I didn't know what it was, and I had, to take a test the next day, so I had to put it out of my mind. But my journey progressed where, things happened in my life as well. My dad took his own life. I had a girlfriend who cheated on me, who broke my heart. Just the pain of that process. All of those things really swelled my ego. They made me further identify with the pain that I was going through, which further intensified my suffering. And this suffering only grew worse and worse and intensified deeper and deeper, no matter what I did. There was nothing I could do or have in the world that made me not suffer or have this dissonance. And the suffering grew so intense that ultimately I went through what I describe as the dark night of the soul, which is just the intensified peak suffering moment or stretch of time through which my ego collapsed, meaning the weight of my mind became so heavy that it imploded. It fell in on itself. And through that moment, I surrendered to the unknown, because it was then when I was at that point when I had two choices. I could pull the plug on myself, which my dad did, but I intuitively knew that was not the answer. Or I could let go, surrender, and see what happened. And I guess, for some reason, this is where it may be my energetic inheritance that I came into this incarnation with. or, you know, my karma, I decided to surrender. I leaned into the surrender option instead of pulling the plug.
Right.
And and that was an authentic, and that's the key. It has to be truly authentic. There can't be any type of ego investment in the surrender. So it was letting go, you know, because to let go, to dissolve the ego, you can't be invested with ego. So like, I let go, and through that process of surrender, divine insight just started to flood into me. I became so thirsty for knowledge, for truth. And so I read every book under the sun I could get my hands on. I quit my job in finance. I became a nomad. I started meditating in forests. I became the typical hippie forest fairy that, you know, every mom doesn't want their child to be. And that's what happened. And but through this process of 18 months, the past 18 months, I have been ascending in energy, ascending in consciousness, just continuing to shed. And so this finally comes, Crystal, to your point about alcohol. Alcohol was something, in nicotine, my two biggest addictions, I had been trying to stop and let go of for many years. And they had been addictions of mine for about 15 years. Deeply embedded conditionings within me that were attempts to numb my pain, to numb the confusion, to numb the loneliness and the meaninglessness of being disconnected from spirit.
Right.
And as I started to grow in consciousness and become more connected to spirit, as my energy level ascended and I vibrated higher, addiction simply did not calibrate with me. It could not be compatible. And so these addictions that I tried to quit myself for years, I couldn't.
Right.
As soon as I let go of my will and surrendered to God's will, the addictions melted off of me. And that's what I think is the true raw power of spiritual connectedness, spiritual transformation, coming into faith. It's the basis of AA. It's the basis of healing. And, you know, for me, that was it. That's all I needed. And I haven't looked back. It's hard to describe because it was such an instantaneous process. It was like one day I was addicted, and, you know, it felt like the next day, more or less, I just was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I know that it was, of course, a gradual shift over many, many years, you know, where this seed of awakening's been fermenting within us in the dormant state, just waiting for our soul's readiness to be able to start harvesting and bearing this fruit of consciousness. So, you know, I'll pause there, but I do want to maybe perhaps transition just the last few minutes of this conversation, Heather, on this note, in terms of looking at, you know, in the context of true healing from trauma, from our conditionings. You know, I pointed to addiction, but addiction is just, you know, one face of this larger crisis, consciousness crisis, spiritual crisis that we're facing, this disconnectedness from source, from home. Separation. That then manifests through addiction, through mental illness, through the desire to end our life and you know, commit suicide, that urge. I personally am of the intuitive sense that this spiritual disconnectedness is the root cause for essentially the overwhelming majority of all suffering and illness that manifests on the mental and physical planes. And that's why I'm so passionate about Awakenpedia and about connecting with people like you, other healers and authentic spiritualists, because I sense that this is the missing link in today's conversations around health and wellness and how we actually address these global crises that aren't getting better. The data shows they're getting worse, you know? So like, we need to start treating at the level of cause, as opposed to treating at the level of symptoms, so that the cause remains and continues to manifest in various symptoms throughout life.
Amen to that.
But is there anything, you know, in terms of your journey, your path, your teachings, that you'd like to just kind of leave with those who have been tuned in here watching in terms of, where you'd say you can start, and if, depending on where you are in this journey, of course, but, a few things that you can do to help kind of just begin the snowball of restoring that connectedness with love, with who you are, with source, and coming home, as you say. I mean, yeah. Well,
I love that. Yeah, amen to that.
Here?
Yeah, I agree with the concept that it is a gentle, gradual, literally one foot in front of the other journey. It's not, I'm reading this paragraph today and tomorrow I'm an enlightened being. And I think when we impose this judgment and perfectionism on ourselves and this desire to fix it right now, that's all ego force. And one day at a time is okay. If yesterday you couldn't get out of bed, then sitting up and taking a deep breath is progress. That is healing, right? So it's letting yourself take whatever one foot in front of the other is for you and acknowledging that as your healing journey. Okay. I think the other thing is to not be afraid of, remove the fear around our emotions. We are, I think, a lot of us afraid of our own pain. We are afraid that it's bigger than us. And if we actually look at it, like the shame that we hold and the suffering and the things that we've experienced, if we actually look at it, it'll just eat us alive, just engulf us in one bite, and we're just going to break under the pressure of it. And that in and of itself is another ego illusion. The pain is never bigger than you. The suffering is never bigger than what you are. And like you said, you came under this huge, immense pressure and it imploded. And through the implosion, you were set free. So I think it feels like you're going to be crushed or going to die because the ego will die in the process of you releasing the pain. There is a fear and there's an unfamiliarity around it, especially if you've been carrying suffering for a long time. The other side of that is scary because it's unfamiliar. It's also the hope, the healing, the salvation. So letting yourself fall into the trust and surrender, because the trust and surrender will dissolve. It'll allow spirit to come through and carry you home. So be willing to feel, but not get stuck in. To see it as it is, but not make it worse than it is, and to always wrap it in hope. Always, always. So feel it, wrap it in hope, take a breath, one foot in front of the other, and find what works for you. Because what works for one person doesn't work for another person.
Right. Yeah. So well said. Absolutely. Amen. I mean, and just, and all piggybacking off that to wrap up here. If you're struggling to such a severe point, suffering so deeply that you are contemplating suicide or you're contemplating ending this experience, look to people like you and I who have experience with this ourselves to know that there is peace right around the corner. All you have to just lean into the suffering and trust that peace is right there. Because I was in that position. I remember it like yesterday, of being in absolute disarray, total confusion, essentially just pure misery,
darkness,
and not knowing where to turn, not knowing who I was. Yes, seek support, use the lifelines you have, right? You don't have to go through this alone. That's what Awakenpedia is for. It's to bring people together so that we can heal together, support each other, be vulnerable with one another, and actually, see each other for our conditions in terms of what they reveal needs to be healed, not to be judged. We want to flip the script to say the blocks you carry let me love you
Yes.
and help you love yourself, as opposed to judge you and make you feel small.
No
And this is what I think, yeah, and this is how we'll help lift each other up instead of keep each other down, and it will transmute competition into cooperation. And it's how we'll come into love, which is the essence of coming home. So awesome. I think we'll end it there. Heather, thank you so much for taking the time. And I think, you know, we can do many more of these going forward. And, you know, Heather also may play, you know, a more active role within the Awakenpedia community in terms of discussing. She has so much wisdom to share and can help so many others heal on this journey. So keep an eye out for that too, in context of Course in Miracles, as well as other avenues, modalities.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a joy. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with everybody and to start to shine light and to be community and not alone, and just help people realize that we're walking each other home. There's no judgment. There's no shame. Come as you are and be embraced by love. And we're doing this together. Thank you. It's an absolute joy. Yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you soon, Heather.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.